So this show is half based on a show we did last year that was based in San Isidro. That's the border city to Tijuana. It's not technically San Diego. And we really, that's where we made some of these lenticular pieces. This one is named San Isidro for that show. It is a funny little town because it has a very sort of gerrymandered sort of link to San Diego proper. And the reason, there's two cities in between, National City and Chula Vista. The reason is because the border is about control, it's about money, and it's about exchange. So San Diego obviously is keeping its eye out. And for a long time they ignored it, and they have to deal with San Isidro as an entity. So we were dealing with some of the issues of the border. We're crossing the border all the time ourselves, since we have a studio in Baja California, in the wine region, and in San Diego as well. We are always moving through this permeable membrane, and we're lucky we have a status that we can do this, because we have both passports and we can sort of traverse relatively freely. They're never totally free. And I think that in this show, when we talked about Quemando las Naves, we took it to the next level of what that means, which is the burning of the ships.
Which is not exactly, breaking, destroying your bridges, because when you burn your bridges, it's like a finality. When you burn your fleet, you have an intention to go back. In Mexico, people say Quemando las Naves a lot when they use up all the resources and go for it, intending to come back. So the analogy for crossing the border is really good, because sometimes they get into debt and risk their lives, but they do intend to come back.
Or with the status of not having a legal status, sometimes their interest is to go back always, but it becomes much more dangerous and in life and limb to be going back and forth. So people establish new routes, even though they really would much rather go back and live in Mexico.
So the context in Mexico comes from Cortés burning all his fleet, so his men would not escape back, so they have to go forward and fight this outnumbered war against the Aztecs. So they had to escape.
And we're interested in what the gambling that it implies. You basically don't even, he thought he was going to India. Or taking a shortcut, if you will. And then the idea of not like falling off the edge of the ocean alone was crazy enough as a gamble. And then to get somewhere and burn the ships down we're really kind of fascinated by this idea that in history there's the people that gambled and won are celebrated. Of course, the people that lost are many, and we don't celebrate that. But apparently, the burning of the fleet or the ships is as old as Alexander the Great, who also did this kind of thing. And here's a very celebrated character that also did very outlandish gambles and won. That's why we are reading about him, otherwise we would not be reading about him. But apparently the burning, Quemando las Naves, is as old as Alexander the Great. So I think that also gives it the context of, if I remember the history right, he was basically faced with a much larger fleet, and his idea was that if we burn down the ships, his own soldiers would have to get the other ones in order to go home. So there is a going back always, but it's going back with all of the...
I would also like to further the idea of this metaphor into our contemporary situation in which we have our mothership, the Earth, and we're kind of burning it up for immediate gambling. So it might work, it might not.
We're hoping that the next generations are as bright as they seem to be. So anyway, so some of these pieces are directly related to the burning of the ships, which is the piece in the entrance, and the one that we unveiled moments ago, which is sort of a fun little satire on the guy burning the ship and the whole idea of gambling. In fact, I think we named that one The Disease of Gambling, and that we're really intrigued by that because it's only celebrated if it's heroic. It's still kind of a crazy thing to do because people's lives are at stake, but that's part of the idea of conquest, after all.
Should we take questions?
Or we could, we could walk around and talk about some, yeah, I mean, you know, the San Isidro piece, when we were making that, we really wanted to reference the crossing of the borders, and San Isidro is sort of the patron saint of sort of farmers and so on, which I'm sure it used to be that way, but the idea that now there's tunnels and people are coming out of tunnels, maybe that's what we're farming. Look at the guy that just escaped in the prison, so it's some fun stuff. And the idea of the border crossing is kind of like these cars. That's how it is. It's mayhem, and that's what we do, just to cross from one studio to the other. So that's how we went towards the San Isidro. Some of these are that was from last year. Some of these are newer. This one, for instance, we made in Chicago at a school. For underprivileged African Americans, called the Little Black Pearl. That's why we named it that. It was really fun. We were in Chicago anyway for another event, and we decided to also do some workshops with students. And it was great to see the interaction between this sort of, you know, because Chicago has a pretty tough inner city situation. And they also had a privileged school come and sort of work and watch our presentation of making this piece, and then we had them get together and work together. And it was almost entirely a white group and an African American group that we had sort of collaborate and broke them up into groups and had a great time. It's just part of what we do. Sort of, we figure we've had good luck and good mentoring, and we should be part of it. Yes.
In terms of your collaborating with each other on a given piece, how do you determine who's doing what? Or?
It's fairly organic, but we do, in blown glass, for instance, we will do drawings, and then we sort of, then we break down to what we need to do. When you're blowing glass, there is definitely there's a very careful path of what comes first and second, because you need to have the timing down. So, and we have a group of people working, whether they're students or the shop that we might rent once in a while. But it is fairly organic stuff. When it comes to public art, which is another thing that we do quite a bit of, and larger scale work, you could say that we do have more definitive tasks. Maybe I do more computer work, and he does more of the engineering and of how things, because sculpture is engineering after all. And when you see the resin castings in some of these pieces, that's also my brother's in sort of casting, making molds and all of that.
Would you talk a little bit about what we're seeing in some of these three pieces? Right.
Well, this one right here is the actual border going into the sea, the Pacific Ocean. So this is Playas de Tijuana on this side, and this is Imperial Beach on this side. And it's a strange, it's kind of an odd space in the American side, because it's quite a nice, beautiful beach, but it's nobody goes there. But it's because it's quite a walk from the parking lot.
And so we decided to collaborate with a very well-known artist, Bosch, anonymous Bosch. He said to us, there's nothing like working with dead people. And you know, this is something that since we were kids, we really gravitated to the whole, you know, his stuff was sort of ahead of its time in a way. Certainly surrealist way before the term was coined. And we loved it. We started working with it because we did a project 3 years back in Belgium, and part of the project was to work with Flemish culture, and we decided to go to the primitives because we figured we're fairly primitive ourselves in a contemporary context. So we decided to talk about the border, kind of like mixing it up, heaven and hell on both of them. So the other piece is this very same border that goes into the ocean, as absolutely ridiculous as this border is, by the way. It goes all the way up, and then you're going to see it up here over this hill. And this is the very same border that goes all the way to Texas. So this part, the Tijuana airport is very close over here. the 5 freeway ends right about there. That's the border. That's where it goes from Vancouver all the way to pretty much that little valley right there.
So the perception of heaven and hell are flipped between the two images. So on this side, people are being processed when they go to the other side. And they literally go through hell to get where they need to go. And the common perception on this side of the US towards Tijuana is that Tijuana is the hell. And that's where we have the scenes of hell and the Garden of the Lights from Geronimo's workshop here.
Although heaven is not as interesting, really.
It's an interesting in a hippie way.
So technically, this would be San Diego in a distance, to show you there is a distance between the borders, and you see there are cities that are going to be on the way there. The drones are real in the sense that they are using drones at the border in order to patrol. And you know, we're making fun of some of the ideas, like going into tunnels in order to cross. A lot of different things are happening in Tijuana. And in the other one, we have a lot, it's talking about privilege. So you have the masses trying to get across the border through a little hole in the fence, but here you have the privileged people using the privileged entrance and exit. But they are, where you can wash your hands of Sentry, which we actually have ourselves. Which is the quick way to cross the border. It's kind of like preferred traveler status. They have that for the border as well. So there's, again, we're collaborating with another dead painter that I'll remember in a second. And so these are lenticular prints, meaning that they are, what you're looking at is really a 1/4 inch thick. The distance in the box is only from